Hello, I'm Tessa Shepperson and I'm here today with Barrister Sam Madge Wyld, who is going to tell us a bit about himself and the work that he does. So, Sam, let's talk first a bit about your background and how you came to be a barrister.
Well, like a lot of people, went to university. I didn't actually do a law degree because when I was 18, it was the last thing in the world I really wanted to do.
Same for me.
Was be a lawyer. So I did a history and politics degree at university, but then like a lot of people that come to leave university, they have to move into the real world, earn some money and decide what they want to do. And I decided, I applied for a job and got it as a immigration paralegal working for a high street firm solicitors in Manchester, and for about a year and a half worked with people claiming asylum or other immigration related matters. And it was during that time that I realised I actually quite enjoyed the law, found it very interesting, liked working with people, and thought I'd go and train to be a barrister. So went to the College of Law, did a law conversion course, did the bar exams, then did pupillage at Arden Chambers, which is the housing law set that I'm at now, and haven't looked back really from then.
So you decided to specialise in housing law. What were your sort of reasons for that?
Yes, well, as I say, I started out doing immigration law, and from that I realised I quite enjoyed doing law that actually affected people as opposed to being about money. But I didn't really want to do criminal or family law. And so there was a whole range of things I wanted to do. But I did a work experience, or what we'd call mini pupillage, at Arden Chambers, where I am now. When I was a student, found that I really enjoyed the sort of work that people were doing, and thought, you know, this looks like something I could do, and applied and got a job tenancy here, and again haven't looked back. I absolutely really enjoy it. What
are the issues that interest you in housing law? Are there any particular sort of themes or cases that you've had that you found particularly exciting?
It's going to sound a bit boring to us, but I find most housing law quite interesting.
So do I. We're boring together.
But no, I like it when housing law interacts with other areas. So the stuff that involves children, or those people that are mentally ill or have other disabilities, that engage with the Children Act 1989 or the Equality Act 2010, where you have to look to other areas to inform the decisions. I also quite like leasehold disputes that involve freeholders and leaseholders arguing about service charges and whether alterations should be made to leases, because it's quite specific there. You're pulling apart documents, and you can be quite pedantic, which some people say I am. So that's
you're a lawyer.
Exactly.
You're supposed to be pedantic. Yeah. So tell us a bit about the work that you do and the cases that you've done. I mean, I understand, for example, you deal with cases both in the private and in the social housing sector.
Yes, and it's probably about 50-50 really. I'd say I do everything concerning housing law, and I suppose on the one hand you've got the freehold, leasehold dispute type areas, but then on the other hand you've got the private landlords, and also then you've got social housing as well, and I deal with all three. So some of the cases that I've dealt with that have gone up to the higher courts recently, which has been most interesting, there was a case I was involved in where a landlord, we were for a local authority and we were a landlord, and we were seeking to recover possession from a tenant who'd been provided with homeless accommodation. So they didn't have any security of tenure, and the tenant was arguing that the Section 11 of the Children Act 2004, which requires local authorities to treat the best interests of children as a primary consideration, that effectively trumped the landlord's right to possession. And the Court of Appeal, which is beneficial to my client, found in favour of us, and so that's very interesting. I've also been involved in a case which looked at when Article 8 defences could be run by a trespasser who'd entered into accommodation as a trespass. He tried to defend the claim on the basis that it would breach his Article 8 rights.
That's human rights, isn't it?
Yes, human rights, and the Court of Appeal said that he couldn't use his Article 8 rights to trump the landlord's right to possession. So that was a good result as well. But yeah, I deal with disrepair, you know, looking at whether Section 21 notice have been invalidated, tenancy deposit stuff. The whole range is what we deal with here and what I deal with.
Okay, you also, I understand, do quite a bit of training and writing. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I mean, that's something I particularly enjoy. The training I really enjoy, partly because not only does it mean that you have to really be up to speed
Yes.
with the topics you're involved with, which I think makes you a better lawyer generally,
Yeah.
but also I really enjoy speaking to, say, 20, 30 keen and enthusiastic people who are working within housing, who want to know more. And often you can bounce ideas around and get really good discussions going. And often I leave training sessions having learned something. People come up with a scenario that you've never thought of, and you have to provide the answer. And I find it very satisfying. And writing as well, albeit you don't have that direct response, again, it ensures that you really get up to speed with the subject, and it means that you know it basically, and so that's something I enjoy doing as well.
So what books and have you been, because I think you edit one of the encyclopedias, do you? Or?
Yes, well I'm a co-authored 2 books which are published by the Legal Action Group. One's called the Housing Law Casebook, which has, we'd hope, every case that is relevant to housing lawyers, although there's probably a caveat to that. I'm sure there are some we haven't got, but we'd like to think that every case that a housing lawyer needs is in there. And also Quiet Enjoyment, which is essentially concerns unlawful eviction and the circumstances in which landlords can remove tenants without a court, or more often the circumstances they can't, and the damages that the landlords may have to pay if they do unlawfully evict tenants. I do also edit or contribute to some books on the local government encyclopedia and local government finance, which aren't really to do with housing so much.
So why do you think training is particularly important for housing work, and what are the dangers for landlords and agents and anyone in housing if they don't keep up to date?
Well, I'd say training's vitally important. Housing law is quite difficult because it's quite pernickety. There's lots of I's to dot, there's lots of T's to cross. And if a private landlord, for example, does all of those things, it's actually relatively straightforward, because the law, certainly with a short-hold tenancy, is quite weighted in favour of the landlord, provided they do everything that they're meant to. The difficulties arise when they don't do everything which they're meant to. And if a landlord or an agent is up to date, they've got good training and they know where the pitfalls are, they know what other landlords what difficulties other landlords have experienced, then they're then they're able to avoid those pitfalls, and it basically means that they can run their business or their portfolio in a much more efficient way, and essentially it means that they don't end up making costly mistakes.
Yes. So finally, do you have any predictions for the future development of housing and advice for people working in housing?
Yes, and I suppose one of the unfortunate things for my prediction for those who are private landlords is I think there's going to be more regulation coming through, and not just that. Certainly there's just recently been a technical discussion paper that's been released by a Department for Communities and Local Government, in which not only are they envisaging more regulation, but also increasing the penalties and also the dreaded rent repayment order.
Which can be very expensive indeed.
Incredibly expensive. And the landlords that haven't licensed properties in Newham, for example, are facing very large rent repayment orders, which is essentially can be all of the rent for the past 12 months. So unfortunately, I think there's going to be more of that for landlords.
Only bad landlords, of course.
Well, no, yes, of course, but you can sometimes, if you can be a bad landlord without not always knowing you're being a bad landlord, and it goes back to training. Essentially, you might not know that you need a license. And that's not, it doesn't mean you're a bad landlord, it just means you haven't read the Act and you're not up to date, and that can result in rent repayment orders. In the social sector, in the socially rented sector, the biggest change that's coming, which we still don't know if it will happen, is the right to buy, the extended right to buy for housing associations, which, although housing associations are likely to be compensated, so they're not actually going to lose any money from those sales, the real worry is that it's going to affect on the funding model for lots of associations, because lots borrow against their stock, and if their stock is depleting, there are real concerns with that. And likewise, the way that this is going to be funded is that local authorities are going to have to sell off their own stock to fund it, and so it might be that some local authorities have much less stock than they do now. So that might happen. We're not sure yet, but it looks likely, as it was a manifesto pledge.
Okay. So what's your advice for landlords and letting agents and housing advice workers and social housing workers?
Well, my advice would always be to make sure that you do have regular training, not all the time obviously, but just make sure you get up to date and make use of all of the free online resources that there are. There are lots of very good blogs. I'll let you plug yours.
Well, the Nearly Legal blog as well.
Yeah, the Nearly
as well
Legal blog, yeah, that's very good. Those sorts of things, you don't have to pay for them. You can simply read them, and there's a wealth of information out there for free. And if you keep abreast of that, then if you're a landlord, you shouldn't be going wrong. And if you're advising tenants, and likewise, you're able to point out where landlords have gone wrong.
Okay. Well, Sam, thank you very much for talking to me.
It's been a pleasure.
And I'll see you soon.